Well, we're having a fantastic day's fishing at range on the feeder. And to be honest with you, it's one of my most enjoyable ways of catching fish. Especially on lakes like this. We're on the Loco, we could be catching anything from F1s to carp up to 20 pound. I've got a nice carp here by the feel of it. And with the right setup, it's one of the most enjoyable ways of catching fish. Now the setup that I'm using today, because I'm fishing at distance, is a setup that I use on a lot of the venues I go to, where I go to Worsborough Reservoir, chucking 90-100 metres into open water, Barston. It's just so suitable for long range method work. And I'm using the Beastmaster DX 12 foot. It's a 90 gram rod. So that means it's got a casting weight of 90 grams. But what I love about it is the action. It's a really nice progressive action at the top. So that means today, for example, we've got to use an inline feeder because we're on the fishing to the fishery rules. I want a nice soft action rod at the top that's going to cushion the fish when they're underneath my feet. Yet at the same time, which is the most important part to a good action rod for long distance work, it's got plenty of power in the butt. So that means when I'm compressing the rod, maximising the compression of the rod to gain distance, I've got that power in the butt, which will allow me to fish in ranges up to 100 metres with this 12 foot rod. And as you can see, just playing this carp here, I've got a lovely soft forgiving action. That's going to minimise hook pulls, especially when I might be hooking the odd F1 or something like that. Now, down to the reel. This is the most important part. I'm using the new Ultegra 5500 XTC. Now, it's basically just a newer version of the very, very popular XTD, but it's so light. Shimano put a lot of time and effort into creating a reel that's ultra smooth, a lot lighter, so that means when you're casting a weight, you can feel the compression of the rod more. But what I love about it is the cranking power. The torque on the reel is unbelievable. So when you're fishing at distance, whether you're bringing back a fish or not, it makes the retrieve so effortless. And the drag system, of course, like with all Shimano reels, is ultra smooth. So any movement from this fish, the drag's going to cushion that movement, along with a soft action rod. It's basically what we call balanced tackle. Everything's balanced right. Mainline, I'm using 016 X-Age to an 022 shock leader. Now, the beauty about Shimano X-Age is it's very, very strong and reliable. I'm actually, as we speak, the knot is, the knot's here. So basically, I'm only playing the fish on 016, but it's that strong, I've got complete confidence in it. And that's what you've got to do. When you're doing this kind of what you call specialist fishing, commercial fishing, use a setup that you're ultimately confident with. Here we are. A lovely common carp. Look at that beauty. Fantastic way of catching fish winter and summer. And a very simple approach as well. One rod, a bit of bait, and you can have a great day's fishing catching fish like that. Look at that, fantastic. Let's slip him in the net and try and catch another one. First and foremost, time is the essence. So during the summer months when the air's warm, you can do this pellet prep on the bankside, not a problem. It takes 20 minutes for those pellets to absorb all that moisture. But during the winter months, I prefer to do it the night before. Give those pellets time in the fridge overnight, absorbing that moisture, and end up with a really perfectly soft, spongy pellet, which is what we're trying to achieve. But on the bank today, it's fine. So let me quickly show you how I prepare them. So get some pellets, put them into a tub, like so. Now what you've got to remember is these pellets will swell up because they're absorbing a lot of moisture. Very different to how I prepare a method feeder. With a method feeder, it's water on, water off. I want them semi-hard in the middle, so they're compact and tight when I'm moulding them around the feeder. But with a hybrid feeder, it's completely different. We want them soft and spongy, so as those pellets are in the feeder and we're compressing them, when the feeder's on the bottom, the bait is being expanding. The pellets are absorbing that moisture and expanding those pellets out of that feeder, which in turn is pushing your hook bait out, making it visible for the fish to feed on. So, first of all, I want to add a good helping of pellet soak, but I'm going to mix it with water to speed up that process. So, maybe 1/4 of a pint of pellet soak in there, and then top it over water. Now, this is the most important thing. I want to do those pellets. I just want to add that water. As you can see there, the pellets are just above the level of water. So I'm just mixing the two ingredients together, i.e. the water and the pellet soak. Give it a shake, and as you can see there now, you can just see the level of the water underneath the pellets. That is the perfect level. Winter and summer, whether it's 2mm, 3mm pellets you're using for the hybrid feeder, that is the level you need. And what we're going to do now is we're going to leave them, let them rest, and in about 20 minutes time we'll come back and they will have fully absorbed all that water, and hopefully, which I'm sure we will, end up with a lovely soft textured 2mm pellet. Right, so as I said, we had to leave these for a while, and as you can see now, they've taken on all that water and they've ended up a really nice soft spongy pellet. Give them a nice squeeze, you see how they compact together, yet at the same time they break down. That's really important with the hybrid feeder, that we've got a really soft textured pellet. It's holding air, so when we're compressing them, the water, they take on the water when they're under the water in the feeder, and that's going to help them expand back out, push your hook bait out, and make a lovely nice tight feeding table on the bottom for the fish to pick out your hook bait. So that's it, nice and simple, and actually quite an easy way of preparing your pellets. So I think it's time we ought to get fishing now, catch a few big boys. Right, let me talk to you about the business end when it comes to long range method work. Now, for a start, my personal opinion is I want a feeder that's giving me security. So when I'm out there fishing at whatever range, that my bait's intact, my feeder's working, a nice neat little table on the bottom, presenting well as well. And there's no better feeder than the hybrid feeder for that reason, simply because you've got the walls around that feeder protecting that bait. Especially when you're chucking at range, you'll often find that a lot of the bait may come off on the surface, but it means that your hook bait's intact in the feeder because you've got the walls around that feeder protecting it, whether it's falling through 8 foot of water or you're chucking against a banking like what I am today. It's giving that security and confidence knowing that everything's intact. So weight wise, you always want to use a reasonably heavy feeder for chucking at distance, because you want to guide that feeder through the air. When you're chucking at distance, you've got the wind, you've got all kinds of elements that you've got to compete against to be accurate. And that's the reason why I use a thin main line as well. So when it comes to the weight of the feeder, 50 to 60 grams for chucking 80 meters plus. By using a thin main line means you're creating less drag on the line as it's coming off the spool. You can hit your clip, you can be more accurate, you can build up a nice tight feeding table easier with a thin main line. And it also means you can fish at further distances. All it's a case of is using the right shock leader. So as I've said, I'm using a thin mainline Shimano X-Sage with 022 shock leader, which is a really strong shock leader. So that is basically the setup. When it comes to the hooks, big hooks, I always compare the hooks that I use in comparison to the bait that I'm going to use. So if I'm using an 8mm pellet or an 8mm boilie or a 10mm boilie, I'll be using a 14 or a 12 hook, because that particular hook marries with that size bait. As well as that, we're targeting carp. As we all know, carp have big mouths. We want a hook that's going to be set in and hold, and you're going to minimise hook pulls. if you're not getting bites, the last thing I'd ever think about doing is going to a small hook trying to get bites. It means that if you do get a bite, you've got to make the most of it and land that fish. So use big hooks and be confident with your setup. And it's just simply a case of actually going out and practicing that to gain that confidence. Hey, we've got one on. When it comes to this kind of style of method feeder fishing, I use two baits really. I use the Dynamite Mini Match Boilies a lot, simply because they catch so many fish. My favourite colour is pink, yellow and white, and generally, because I'm confident in pink, pink is the first colour I'll try. The other bait I use when it comes to long range fishing is pellets. Pellets and boilies, you cannot go wrong. What you've got to remember is when you're fishing at range, use a hook bait that's creating a clean hook. So that means you're maximising a good hook hold when you're fishing at range. It's not like fishing at 20 metres, you're fishing a long way out. You've got to make the most, you've got to make every bite count, every fish count, and that's going to help you catch more fish whether you're in a match or pleasure fishing. We've just got a nice F1 here now. So be confident with your setup and use big hooks if you're going to use big baits like this. You could just see that pink bait just out of the fish there. I'll just hopefully pick it up with the hook bait still in as well. See that there? Right in the bottom lip. So what's happened is there, that fish has been sucking on the bait, on the feeder. It's picked up the hook bait, it's gone back up to come back off the bottom, and then the hook is set. And that's why generally on the feeder, you'll nearly always hook them in the corner of the mouth or the bottom lip. Right, let me talk to you about the casting technique, which I think a lot of people struggle on. And it's something that if you want to master, you've got to spend a bit of time practicing. But understanding the basics will really help you move forward with your casting technique, your accuracy, and the ease of actually casting at range. As I've said, I've discussed the right weight feeders to be using, the right action rod, using the right lines, the right shock leaders, but the technique in the cast itself is the most important area. So this is how I particularly cast. Now, what you've got to remember is your right hand is a pendulum, it's a hinge. The casting technique comes from pulling the rod towards you as the feeder comes behind you. Now, there's two ways of doing it. At an average distance, let's say today I'm fishing 80 metres, I'm doing a bit of a slow pendulum. Whereas if you need to cast further, you need to have your feeder static behind you, like that. So you're getting a full compression forward, and that is really going to increase the distance that you're fishing at. But because I'm only fishing an 80 metre chuck, which, you know, is still a long way, but it's not a massive chuck, I can compress my rod by just doing a pendulum behind me. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at my marker. So I've got my feeder rod ready, everything's loaded, I'm ready to cast. But the most important thing is I am aiming my rod at the marker, a bit like a bow and arrow. And I'm constantly looking at my marker. So then all it's a case of is bringing my feeder back nice and slow. And as the feeder comes behind, you'll find that the feeder pulls the rod down and the butt out. And that is when it's time to grab the butt and pull it towards you. And that is where you get your full compression of the rod. When you're casting, you cast with the bottom third of your rod, not the top. So that is why it's really important to have a pendulum. And then you're using the bottom action of the rod to cast further forward. So, feeder comes back, the rod rises, and pull, and that's it. A really, really effective way of casting a long way. Look at this. What a perfect fish to round a cracking day's fishing off. Timmy the Tench. Look at that. Fantastic. So, there you have it. What a great day's fishing I've had. Really enjoyed it. And hopefully, with the tips I've given you, you'll be able to go out and put the long range method feeder to use on a lot of waters. And I hope the tips have been really helpful for you. Best of luck and hope you catch loads of fish. Tight lines.